Yo, what is up, my fellow mercenaries? Mark with the Game Boy here. I've been meaning to make this discussion video for quite some time now, probably since about Nintendo's E3 presentation, because I've seen both sides of the fence with the argument of what to expect with Pokemon Sword and Shield. I know there's the controversy of the national dex not being a thing at the moment, and there's also a discrepancy at the moment with the graphics of the game. And I kind of want to discuss that and give my thoughts on where I see how I see Sword and Shield as games and how I see these controversies, because in my personal opinion they get blown way out of proportion with this whole thing, and I've seen so much of it on Twitter, it's ridiculous. So I'm going to get into all of that in this video, so stay tuned, and here we go. So first off, the issue with the national dex. I understand people complaining, it's the whole thing that every Pokemon is somebody's favorite. So, understandably, if your favorite Pokemon's not in it, then you're going to have an issue or whatever. You're going to be upset that your favorite Pokemon isn't there. But on the other side of the coin, if you look back at the previous two generations, we've had the problem where we haven't had Pokemon Bank support for a good, year into the game. So, it's one of those things, we didn't have a national dex, a full national dex at launch for these games like Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, and X and Y. We didn't have full support for all Pokemon, and that was added later via patches. And Pokemon Company has not explicitly said that they won't patch it. Sure, Masuda's statement earlier this week kind of put a sour taste in a lot of people's mouth, because he essentially was saying if they're not in this game, they could be in future games. But it's honestly a matter of if they actually decide to patch in Pokemon, because what they could do is they could do a similar rollout situation like what they do with Pokemon Go, where they release Pokemon in waves, and I feel like that would work really well for Sword and Shield if they're adding compatibility. And it's the issue of the developers taking time and making sure that it's the best that it can be. So I don't see why that's exactly a huge issue, because I've seen this argued back and forth so many times, and a lot of people just refuse to listen to reason when it comes to this situation. And in all honesty, it kind of pisses me off, because Pokemon Company has been getting a lot of shit because of the fact that last year they released Let's Go, and people complained that that wasn't what they wanted. They wanted a mainline game on the Switch, and they wanted it now. So that is what Game Freak is delivering, and they were held to kind of a time constraint because of the fact Nintendo wanted Pokemon on the Switch, the fans wanted Pokemon on the Switch, and everyone was bitching that they weren't getting what they wanted. And Let's Go last year gave them time to get something together, but even at that, they didn't have enough time to put over fucking 900 Pokemon in this game. And that ends up being the main issue here that people are complaining about. They're complaining about what we're getting when this is what people bitched that they wanted, and now people are saying, oh, delay the game. There's so much other stuff that goes into Pokemon. They can't just delay the game. Financially speaking, that can't happen because of anime, promotional material, Nintendo. They still have publisher deadlines, and they can't just push the game back because fans are gonna bitch. Worst case scenario, I think if we do get the other Pokemon in the game, it's gonna be via patches. And that may suck to some people. I know for a fact if there's some Pokemon that I like that aren't in the game, sure, I'll be upset, but it's not a huge deal because there's always Pokemon you can replace with, and you can experiment with new teams regardless of what's available in the game. So I don't see this as really huge point of contention with the game, and I think it's asinine that people are going to complain as much as they are about this, because it just doesn't make any sense to me. And then the next point that I've seen floating around is just the fact of people complaining about the graphics for the games. Now, if we look at Pokemon games, they've never been anything that were too graphically impressive. We don't play Pokemon games for the graphics, or at least most people don't. To this day, I think the most physically beautiful game I've played for a Pokemon game has been Heart Gold and Soul Silver. But even at that, the games in the 3DS era weren't exactly pretty. X and Y is fucking ugly, and Sun and Moon, it was an improvement, but it still wasn't insane graphical fidelity. And I get that these are handheld games, but also you have to look at the fact that Game Freak has been mainly a handheld developer for their entire existence. So sitting here and expecting them to have Breath of the Wild graphics in Pokemon Sword and Shield, that is an asinine thing to expect when Game Freak never promised that to us. And I just don't understand where people got the idea, oh yeah, Pokemon's going to be an open world game on the Switch. It's going to be this huge graphical thing, and it's going to be one of those games that sets it apart from the rest of the franchise like Breath of the Wild was for Zelda, when Game Freak never promised us that. All they promised us last year is they promised a mainline core Pokemon game for the Nintendo Switch, and that is exactly what they're delivering. So I do not understand even remotely where people are coming from when they say that its graphics look like shit. Sure, overworld textures don't look great, but the cities look great. It's honestly looking the best. The cities themselves look the best out of any Pokemon game I've ever seen personally. And I don't care. You're going to sit here and say that a tree's texture doesn't look right. How many fucking people actually focus on the overworld in a Pokemon game? The thing that matters the most, at least to me personally, would be the graphics in battle, because that's where you're spending most of your time. Most times people don't give a goddamn about the overworld. The overworld in Pokemon games is literally just there most of the time. It's mostly about the battles. So as long as the battles look fine, I don't understand where there is an issue with this, because I've seen so many people complain, and it's so fucking like out of line, because Game Freak still has a lot to learn developing for a console like this, because this is the most powerful console they've ever developed for. So you have to take that into consideration, especially when you're sitting here and criticizing them for how their game looks on the Switch. If you honestly think that you could do better, fine, create your own fucking game studio, make a goddamn game. It's not as easy as it looks, especially when you have your methods of working in less powerful systems, because the Game Boy, the 3DS, none of that compares to the power of the Switch. This is easily leagues more powerful than anything Game Freak has developed for, and that's what a lot of people are failing to understand. So I guess I'm done with this whole rant thing. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section down below, and yeah, have a nice day, guys.